Picture, if you will, a brazen, unpredictable landscape where the Edmonton Elks have won 2 consecutive football games. Welcome to the Twilight End Zone. It's what you get on a Wednesday afternoon, folks. What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. Not fueled today by nerd teas because we're recording this bad boy in the middle of the day, and I'm an old man and don't like to have caffeine after a certain point in the day, but we are, of course, sponsored in spirit by my great friends at Nerd Teas. And welcome to lucky week number 13 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2023 CFL football season, and we're coming off of a 7-5 week, aided in large part by a sweep of the final game of the week last week, which saw the Edmonton Elks win a home game for the first time since before the Panini. That Elks win helped propel me to a 7-5 week in week 13. Now 29-18 picking the games straight up, which is inching ever closer to where I kind of wanted to be at this point in the season. So getting closer to that. Only 1-3 against the spread, but your boy was 3-1 on the totals last week. Have I done that once this season? I don't think so. We might be building some momentum here. And as baffling as this might seem, if I average 7-5 a week for the rest of the season, 2 games over 500, I get back to 500, which feels utterly inconceivable given where we were just a couple of short weeks ago. I'm 16 games under 500. There's 9 weeks left. Can I do it? I'll tell you what I can do. I can have myself an excellent week in CFL Fantasy, which is exactly what happened in week 12, bringing in a big total of 143 points even on the week. Top 125 throughout the entire CFL Fantasy game, which, as we know, is well over 10,000 users. It's literally thousands and thousands of users, and I was in the top 125. Had ourselves an excellent week. Inside the top 25 in Derek Taylor's league as well. Now, 1149.9 on the season for fantasy points. Inside the top 360 overall, and the top 65 in Derek Taylor's league. My MOP spurred me on to great things last week, and that was Edmonton quarterback Trey Ford. A massive performance for Trey Ford, getting the Elks over the hump at home for the first time since 2019. 391 all-purpose yards for Trey, a passing touchdown, a rush touchdown, did not throw an interception. Good for 29.4 points, and double it up because he was my team captain. 58.8 points Trey Ford put on the board for my team, and it propelled me to a monster week. And a monster week is exactly what we are hoping to get here in week 13. Another 4-game slate this week that sees the BC Lions suddenly reeling in Montreal to take on the Alouettes. We've got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in Saskatchewan to take on the Riders. Toronto is in Hamilton to take on the Ticats. And the Elks hit the road, going to Calgary to take on the Stampeders. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Labor Day weekend in the CFL. It is a beautiful thing. We love it. And let's get started. Taking a peek at some league-wide trends that I happened to notice. 3 more overs last week. The over goes 3-1. 8-4 now over the last 3 weeks was the over. Does this signal the unofficial relaunching of #overseason? And just taking a peek at some of these teams and how they're performing against the spread and over-under this year. The Argos remain the best against the spread bet league-wide. They're 7-2 against the spread in their 9 games. And it's pretty easy to bank on a Ticats under. They've hit just 3 of 10 overs this season. But let's get started with that BC-Montreal matchup, and to my eyes, it is officially time to sound the alarm bells in BC, dropping their 3rd in their last 4 games, including back-to-back losses now to what I would consider lower-end competition. They lose to Saskatchewan, and they lose to Hamilton. This is a problem if you're the BC Lions. You're supposed to be an elite team in this league. And if we're looking at something to blame, I squarely point at the run game. The Lions have not cracked 65 yards rushing as a team since July. They're going to go the entire month of August without hitting 65 yards rushing as a team in a game, and have been badly beaten in time of possession in back-to-back weeks, averaging just 25 and a half minutes possessing the football. How did that manifest itself? Last week, they only had 11 offensive drives in the entire game. And what was even worse, because they couldn't establish a run game and only had that few number of possessions, only one of their drives had 10 or more plays in it. This is a problem when you're only throwing the football. And it was kind of unfortunate for the Lions because the pass rush was working. They had 4 quarterback sacks. The secondary was working. They only gave up 222 yards passing to Taylor Powell, but they had absolutely no answer for James Butler. A bit of a revenge game there for Butler. He absolutely did work the entirety of the game on the ground and through the air, and that only exacerbates that need for more than just passing on offense. When you're looking at the other side and you see how they're using a running back that used to be on your roster, can't feel too good. On the Alouettes side, Montreal got their lunch money stolen by Winnipeg by the tune of a 30-point loss, 47-17, easily their worst whole team showing in nearly 2 months. Cody Fajardo returned to the lineup after a 2-game absence. Didn't really inspire a ton of fanfare in that game. Only 56% on his passes for 137 scoreless passing yards. Did not throw a touchdown, obviously. Did throw an interception. Only carried the ball 1 time for 15 yards. Just not a very Cody Fajardo-like game. And I have to ask the question, was he ready to play? If he wasn't ready, you should have left him on the bench because you got Caleb Evans. And while I know there are some Caleb Evans detractors who watch my videos, don't tell me Caleb Evans couldn't have done better than that. 152 scoreless all-purpose yards? Evans might have gotten that on the ground. And unlike their Lions counterparts this week, neither side of the ball was working for the Alouettes last week. Just 10 measly first downs in that game, only possessed the ball for 23 and a half minutes on offense. They gave up 47 points on 447 total yards, despite the fact that they had 2 pick sixes. But think about that. They had 17 points, including 2 pick sixes. Where's the offense? As far as I'm concerned, the BC Lions loss last week was symptomatic of larger issues with their team, and they've been consistent, pervasive issues for a large portion of the season. While the Alouettes loss just kind of felt like a blip on the radar, like they got their lunch served to them and their lunch money stolen from them by one of the best teams in the league. So it felt like it didn't feel like it's like, oh man, huge problems in Montreal. Like they were white hot going into last week, as are the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and the Bombers remain. So it doesn't feel like the world is falling down despite the fact that they lost by 30. I know Jason Moss has already come out and said, look, Cody Fajardo's our quarterback. We are not even considering a quarterback move at this point. Of all the things we're considering, that is not one of them. I appreciate the fact that he's going to sort of stick with his guy and do what he needs to do as the head coach of that team. Fajardo or Evans is a legitimate question. Despite who I may not agree with them starting at quarterback, I kind of like the Alouettes here. Again, I think that loss is a blip on the radar. Yeah, they got beaten up by one of the best teams in the league. But BC's not getting beaten up by the best teams in the league. They're getting beaten up by Hamilton and Saskatchewan. There are larger problems there for the Lions, and genuinely, I think the Alouettes might be the better football team top to bottom. I would rather have Vernon Adams as my quarterback, but there's legitimate questions there when you go down the rest of the rosters. I'm going to go with the Alouettes here. I'm going to take the upset and take the Montreal Alouettes at home to get the win over the BC Lions. I think Montreal, this is a statement game for the Alouettes. They take a step forward here, prove that they are the second best team in the East Division, and really grab that momentum heading towards the playoffs. So I like the Alouettes at home to get the win over the Lions. Now, against the spread, the Alouettes are taking plus 3.5 as a home dog. So obviously, I like them to win. Give me the plus 3.5 on Montreal. And that might be a number that I might want to consider hedging on either way, because I do think this is a relatively close matchup. Total in this game set at 45.5. Neither one of these teams kind of blow you out of the water with how they've performed against the spread or over under situationally or on the season. Montreal's results have been a little bit better. I think I got to take the over on this. It's a pretty good number, but I think this does get over by a point or two. So give me over 45.5 points in BC Montreal. We're going to go slightest margins here, 24-23 in favor of the Alouettes. Als win, Als cover, and give me the over on the points, maybe a last second field goal. Winnipeg and Saskatchewan are up next, and the Bombers, again, decimating Montreal on all sides of the ball last week. Their second most decisive win of 2023, trailing only their 50-14 win over the Lions back in Week 9. That was the Dane Evans-led BC Lions. And after exiting the game against Edmonton and missing Week 11 against Calgary, Zach Collaros returns to weird results. I'm not even going to say mixed results, like weird results. He completed 2/3 of his passes, which is great. 240 passing yards, that's fine. 4 passing touchdowns. A massive offensive performance for Zach Collaros, but he also threw 3 interceptions, and 2 of them went back to the house as pick sixes. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I don't want to call it rust because he's such a veteran quarterback. I don't think that's necessarily what it was, but I am going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he probably still is the MOP. But no doubt is being cast upon that defense. The defense for the Bombers pitching a 201-yard gem where they forced 2-and-outs on 50% of the Alouettes' possessions in the second half. 4 2-and-outs on the Alouettes' 8 second-half possessions, plus generating 3 turnovers on the other 4 possessions that weren't 2-and-outs. An interception, a fumble recovery, as well as a turnover on downs. A massive defensive performance for the Bombers. They've really come together as a unit. The Riders enter this week off the bye. They're even money on the season at 5-5, but winners of 2 of their last 3 games, including a 5-point win against BC in Week 11, a game where Jake Dolegala, as the starting quarterback, threw for 239 and 3 scores. And I point out Dolegala specifically because this is a quarterback room to watch, because Coach Dickinson, being Craig Dickinson, has not named a starting quarterback officially. I don't think to this point. I think he still hasn't. But there was a quote that came out earlier this week that says, "We hope to have Mason Fine back by the Labor Day Classic." So that would seem to indicate that if Fine is healthy, Fine gets the start. But how do you bench Jake Dolegala after a really clean game where you beat a team that I think is objectively better than you? How do you send that guy back to the bench? As far as I'm concerned, the strength of this offense for the Riders moving forward is the diversity of the passing attack, and that has been unlocked with the return of Kyan Schaefer-Baker. I'm a huge KSB fan. Everybody knows it. If you watched my show last year, a massive fan of KSB, and was a massive fan of Kyron Moore before that, before he went off to Edmonton. But I think the diversity of this passing attack, because most of the season we've talked about Sean Bain and Tevin Jones, and it's kind of been a bit of a 2-man show. They've taken a back seat, and now you're talking about Kyan Schaefer-Baker, you're talking about Brandon Lanius, and you're also talking about Jareth Stearns, a guy, again, an underrated provider of fantasy value is Jareth Stearns. So the fact that you can roll out a really good top 4, top 5 wide receivers, the diversity of that passing attack and the ability to spread the football, I think is the key to that offense moving forward. And on the defensive side, they've ramped up the pressure, 12 quarterback sacks in their last 3 games. I mean, everybody knows that this rivalry is always fireworks, especially on Labor Day weekend, and then following that right up with the Banjo Bowl. We're going to be watching Zach Collaros really closely in this one to make sure that 3 interception game was not more than just kind of, again, benefit of the doubt. Everybody has a bad game. We're going to be watching him closely, but boy, it's tough not to ride with the Bombers in this matchup, especially with how good that defense has been trending over the last few weeks. We're going to have to go ahead and roll with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in this matchup. Give me the Bombers on the road in Saskatchewan, who again are coming into this game off of their bye, so they will be well rested. But give me the Bombers, especially if Mason Fine starts. Let's be perfectly honest. Bombers get the win over the Riders. Now, on the line, the Riders are taking +7.5 against the spread here at home as a home dog. Both of these teams are kind of under 500 situationally. So the Bombers on the road and the Riders at home against the spread. They're both 2-3 on the season, but the Bombers have been more reliable in terms of covering their number. They're 6-5 against the spread, whereas the Riders are under 500 for the season. So I think I got to take the Bombers to cover this number. Let's go -7.5. Bombers cover -7.5. Total in the game set at 46.5 points, and this is one that I feel really good about. These two teams combined situationally 7-3 to the over. So the Riders 4-1 to the over at home this season. The Bombers over 500 on the road to the over. So give me more than 46.5 here. Over 46.5 in Winnipeg, Saskatchewan. Let's go Bombers 31, Riders 21. So Bombers win. Bombers cover the -7.5 and give me the over on the points. So as I mentioned, I don't have a cup of tea this week, but that is no reason to not shout out my great friends and sponsors at Nerd Teas and Coffee Bean. You go to nerdteas.ca and you are going to find dozens and dozens of incredible loose leaf tea, estate coffee, and flavored coffee blends. No matter what your taste palette, you are going to find something incredible on nerdteas.ca. And when you do that, you're going to want to use my promo code to save yourself some money. 15%, in fact, on any order, anything that you order from nerdteas.ca. You're also going to get free shipping in Canada on any order over $100, which is excellent value. And you're going to get a great conversion rate on the US dollar if you're one of my viewers from the United States. nerdteas.ca, promo code BWFinest, save your 15%, get your free shipping, find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love. You can do it on nerdteas.ca. Back half of the show now, and let's go to the Battle of the QEW, the Toronto Argos in Hamilton taking on the Ticats. And for the Argos, you're looking at a dicey performance in the middle frames from last week. The defense allowing all 31 points that they allowed to Calgary in the second and third quarters. So right in that middle part of the game is where you saw the defense kind of give up the most. But the first quarter they pitched a shutout, and in the fourth quarter they locked it down, riding a punt return touchdown from Javon Leake to their 8th win of the season. Since being injured against the Calgary Stampeders on August the 4th, Chad Kelly does have 7 passing touchdowns as well as a rushing touchdown in just 2 games. So Chad Kelly is lighting it up, but he has also thrown 3 of his 7 interceptions in those 2 games as well. So while I like seeing him open up the playbook and play with more confidence, it has led to him being a little sloppier over the last couple of games since he came back from injury. So definitely something for us to keep an eye on. Now, I talked about this Argos pass defense last week, opining about, what's it going to look like if we're getting closer to the playoffs and they're still giving up 300 passing yards a game. Look, the Argos secondary, except for week 9 against Calgary, except for that game, this secondary has given up at least 279 yards passing every single game. That's what we talk about here, where the pass defense is reliably giving up a ton of yardage, with the exception of that one game, which actually makes their average look a lot better than maybe it should be. But what's great about this Argos defense is not just anybody can translate that into points on the board. Because despite the fact that they're giving up so much yardage through the air, they're only allowing 22.9 points a game on defense, which is the number 4 scoring defense in the CFL. So can you call that middle of the pack? Sure, but when you're arguably one of the worst passing secondaries, middle of the pack as a scoring defense is actually an accomplishment. We move to Hamilton's side of things now, and the Ticats engineer one of the biggest upsets in the CFL this season, winning outright in BC as a double-digit underdog. So there's all kinds of layers to this. Like, first of all, Hamilton winning this game outright, as, you know, you don't even have to argue that BC is the better of the two teams. We know this to be true. But to beat BC in BC, and to win a game at all as a double-digit underdog. All of these things were massive for the Ticats, and they hold a potent Lions offense to just 13 points on the board. Taylor Powell was fine in what was his fourth start at quarterback, 78% on his completions, which is really good for 222 yards passing, a clean game with one pass touchdown, no interceptions. This is now back-to-back games without an interception for Taylor Powell. Very important for a young and developing quarterback. But this was the James Butler show, ladies and gentlemen. 24 touches of the football, 154 all-purpose yards, a rush touchdown, and a receiving touchdown. We call that one the Austin Eckler special for my NFL fans. But look, the last two games, James Butler has been a monster. 41 touches of the football, first of all, there's commitment. 300 all-purpose yards on the nose, and 3 total touchdowns. He has been on a mission these last couple of games, and it's definitely helped Hamilton get back into the swing of things here in the East Division playoff picture. On the defensive side, the Ticats benefited from a trio of Lions turnovers in that game, keeping their offense on the field for long periods of time to really kind of hammer away, pun intended, I guess, with James Butler. Again, 36 and a half minutes time of possession for the Ticats in that game. When your offense is on the field, you just have a better chance of winning football games. That's what we saw for the Ticats. They won that game in a big way. This is, of course, the second straight top opponent for the Hamilton Ticats. This one coming without, like, the big obvious flaws of the BC Lions, because I still think the Lions are probably the third best team in the league, but they've got big obvious flaws. We talked about them earlier in this show. The Argos don't have big obvious flaws, certainly not in the same way. So we're really going to find out in this game if what happened against BC was the signs of a beginning of a turnaround for the Ticats, or were the Ticats just the beneficiary of the circumstance of who they were playing. You got to lean on the Argos in this one, I think, unless, of course, you're a Ticats fan. But I think you got to lean on the Argos here. Let's take Toronto on the road in Hamilton to get the win over the Ticats. Now I'm about to be as disrespectful as maybe I've been this season, and I don't intend to be. The Hamilton Ticats are 8.5-point dogs at home and lay the points on the Argos. So I got nothing against the Hamilton Ticats, but on the season, the Hamilton Ticats are the worst betting team in the CFL. So in terms of either covering against the spread or hitting the over on the points, the Ticats combined are 7-13 this year. They are 4-6 against the spread. They are 3-7 to the over. At home, it's ugly. Ugly at Tim Hortons Field. The Ticats 1-4 against the spread and 1-4 to the over. So what you want to do in situations like this is take the opponent points and take the under. And that's exactly what I'm going to do in this game. I'm going to lay the -8.5 on Toronto. The Argos are a wagon as far as I'm concerned. Have there been some blips? Yes, but this is very clearly the best, or at least 1A, 1B team in this league. So lay the -8.5 on the Argos, and I'm going to take under on the 47.5 point total. It is the largest total of the week. This total in some places has gone as high as 50. Like, I would certainly take that, but I'm going to lean on the under here because that's just the way the Ticats have played at home this year. It has not been a pretty picture, and I don't necessarily think that the performance from last week is indicative of what you're likely to see. So let's take the under here. I'm going to go 30-13 in favor of the Argos. Argos win, Argos cover, and give me the under on the point total. And the last game of the week sees the Edmonton Elks, the suddenly streaking Edmonton Elks in Calgary, taking on the Stamps. So you remember how last week when I talked about the Elks, literally my whole first point was just the Edmonton Elks have won a football game? It was fun. Here's my first point this week. The Edmonton Elks have won 2 football games. And 2 football games in a row. And one of them was at home. In the immortal words, the immortal parlance of the Pat McAfee show, Trey Ford, dog. Trey Ford's got that dog in him, man. He torched the Red Blacks defense last week. 381 all-purpose yards, like we mentioned, a passing touchdown, a rushing touchdown. He only failed to complete 3 of his pass attempts the entire game. He was on another planet. He had over 7 yards per carry running the football. Also, welcome back Geno Lewis. 3 catches for $112 and that passing score. So, Trey Ford, meet Geno Lewis. He's your new best friend. But look, as much as I can glow on the Elks offensively, this was probably the crowning performance for Edmonton's defense this season. Ottawa, a paltry 35% on second down. A huge performance from this Elks defense on second down, and the pedestrian Elks secondary to this point in the season, allowing just 172 scoreless passing yards to Dustin Crum. Probably the best defensive performance that we've seen out of Edmonton all season long. On Calgary's side, the Stampeders lose a close rematch in Toronto to the Argos as the defense allows a $116 on the ground, part of 477 total yards in that game. 0 points on the board for the Stamps until midway through the second quarter. So it was a slow start and the defense had no answers. Now, despite the fact that it was a slow start, it was a massive 4-touchdown, 387-yard showing from Jake Maier, which reminds us all that he's really capable of good things when he remembers how to play quarterback. And if he had more consistency, then we'd probably talk about him more often in a more positive light. Reggie Begelton coming back on the scene here, 9 catches, 203 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns, as well as touchdown receptions from Markin Michel, as well as Luther Hakunavanu. So Jake Maier did spread the ball around, and spread the ball around in the red zone as well. 3 different touchdown receivers. This Stampeders offense is capable of very good things. Sometimes. Here's where I run into problems with the Stamps, especially on the offensive side. This run game is not operating the way it should be. Dedrick Mills ceding carries in that game to Levante Bellamy. And as far as I can tell, it wasn't an injury situation. So it was a matter of ineffectiveness and wanting to kind of switch up the run game, ceding, and it was multiple carries to Levante Bellamy in that game. Mills has failed to go over 46 rushing yards in all but 1 game since the middle of July, and they were just 14 for 59 yards running the ball as a team in that game last week. You got to be able to run the ball in this league to have a consistent offense. Just ask the Lions. So, it's worth pointing out here that if Jake Maier has remembered how to play quarterback, Calgary can certainly, A, win this game, and B, make a run in the context of the West Division playoff race. But a rainy second half, which is what we're expecting in this game weather-wise, means that there is going to be a priority on the run. And based on the way that Calgary's run offense has been operating lately, it's tough to rely on them, even though they're against, quote-unquote, the worst run defense in the league. And I understand that statistically that is the case, but this Edmonton defense is not the same as it was 3 or 4 weeks ago. Watch the game again last week and try to tell me that they are. I like the Elks here. The Elks are actually a strong underdog play as Calgary's laying 5.5 points at home, but The Stamps are under 500 against the spread at home this year. They're under 500 against the spread just in general, whereas the Elks are actually 3-2 against the spread on the road this year. So I'm going to take those 5.5 points one way or the other, but I'm going to grab the Elks to win this game outright. Trey Ford is doing something special with that offense. He's the guy. Let him cook. I think they can do something special. Total in this game set at 46.5 points, and everybody that's talking about this game is talking about, oh, it's going to be fireworks, there's going to be a lot of points, offensive clinics on both sides. The Edmonton Elks are 0-5 on the road this year to the over. They have not hit one road over all season long. Now, I understand. You can make the exact same point back to me that I just made to you. It's not the same team as it was 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. Granted. But given the fact that the Stampeders are also under 500 to the over at home, I'm just not going to take the over here. I'm going to play those numbers, play the percentages. Give me under the 46.5 point total in Edmonton, Calgary. I'm going to take the Edmonton Elks to get the upset for their third consecutive win. Elks win this game 23-21. So give me the plus 5.5. Give me the Elks to win outright, and give me the under on the 46.5 point total. There you go, folks. Those are my picks for Week 13 in the CFL. We'll go over them here with you just one more time. I got the Montreal Alouettes in Montreal upsetting the BC Lions by a single point, 24-23. Give me the plus 3.5 on the Alouettes and over the 45.5 point total. Give me the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on the road in Saskatchewan in their Labor Day Classic by a final score of 31-21. So I'm going to lay the minus 7.5 on Winnipeg in a game that goes over 46.5 points. I got the Toronto Argos beating the Hamilton Ticats 30-13 in Hamilton. Give me the minus 8.5 on the Argos and under 47.5 on the total. And the Edmonton Elks I've got upsetting the Calgary Stampeders 23-21. That means the Elks will cover plus 5.5 is what I'm taking against the spread, and give me the under on the 46.5 point total. CFL Fantasy for this week, it is Wednesday, so I will tell you my team. I'll show it to you here in just a second, but I will make a point of saying this is not what my final roster is going to be. I put this together, but there's a lot of question marks that I'm going to have leading into this weekend. Still have multiple days before the week even starts, so my roster is going to change. But as of right now, my CFL Fantasy roster is right in front of your eyes, rolling Chad Kelly at quarterback, but I could very well swap back down to Trey Ford and save some money. James Butler and AJ Ouellette at running back. Reggie Begelton and Keon Hatcher, two of the best wide receiver options for fantasy this season. Going to roll with both of them at wide receiver. Jareth Stearns, my nice little secret weapon there in fantasy, only $4,500 and has a consistent role in that Riders offense. And I'm going to grab the Argos on defense. Week 13, it's in the books now, folks. Thank you so much for taking the time to stop by and watch the episode. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled in spirit this week by the great folks at Nerd Tees. Thank you for watching the episode. Week 14 comes next week, and it is the start of the NFL season. So we're going to start going to our 2 a weeks, which means this show is going to go back to its permanent home on Wednesday, with the NFL show firing up on Tuesday, September 5th. We'll see you then.